group and this gender. So first, let me just tell you a couple of things. I do have books to sell because I am a business person, and I want you to buy the book. If you don't buy it for yourself, which I know you love it, okay, I've got about 80 reviews on Amazon, and all of it about 5 stars, so it's a good book, and I feel confident telling you that you will enjoy it, and it's funny. The title doesn't indicate that because it is a serious topic, adoption, but I'm a humorist writer. That is my writer's or author's voice, and so you will laugh. I can't say you won't cry, but I promise you'll laugh. And what I tell women specifically who have dealt with infertility and or adoption, they will find a friend, me, on every page. And I was telling some of the ladies before, I get high fives virtually through the internet from across the country, from women all over America, and even Canada and the UK. So I'm also an international businesswoman, not to a great extent, but still. So I'd love for you to buy the book. I also put some brochures on the tables, and these are just things I take with me. These are just some relationships I have. We use Bethany Christian Services. Are any of you familiar with Bethany? They do international, domestic adoption. They operate some Safe Families ministries. They also do embryo adoption, which just fascinates me. Then this is Secret Safe Place. I don't know if you've heard of the Safe Haven law, where infants can be abandoned legally. And so that's just something, and this is actually something that started in Blount County. And then this is a brochure for Harmony Family Services. And they're not too far away. Their office is on Mabryhood, but they also have the Family Center in Blount County. And then this is my little flyer that I leave with schools and daycares and churches. And you all can take a little piece off, or I just had enough, I think, one for every table, but you could post this anywhere you like, and it seems to do pretty well to help spread. And there are some reviews on there, just a few. Okay. And then I'll have all this. I also have some articles that I've written for online magazines and other bloggers' websites about adoption. And some, I think, I chose the 3 that I thought would be most relevant to you guys, one of which is the top 10 questions I answer about open adoption. The other is a to-do list for friends and family of waiting parents, and that was published in the UK. It did really, really well. And then, what was the other one? Hold on. This one was just published this week in Bella Online Magazine. It's a great women's online magazine, free, and it has all types of topics, but there's an adoption section. And Deanna Keller's the editor, and I wrote it. It's titled Beautiful, Burdensome Blessing, because to me that's what adoption is. That's how I describe it pretty often. So let's talk about the burdensome blessing. I went through 6 years of infertility. I had my son Houston in 2002, so he's 12 now. And my husband was 36 when we got married. So, and I was 26, yeah. So once he was, I rebounded physically, I was ready to try again because of our ages and because I wanted 3 children. That was my goal. That was my human goal, limited goal. And so we started trying as soon as he was about 9 months old. And then struggled for 6 years. That was the most heart-wrenching, isolating, expensive thing I've ever done. It actually, I think I spent more on infertility than I did on adoption. And during all that time, of course, I'm a teacher, and I love to do research, and I love to write, and I love to read. So I tried to find books to help me. So I'm sure some of you, if you're going through something, you get a diagnosis or something's going on in your life professionally and personally, you reach out for written material to help you through it. And I am a Christian. I've actually just finished up a tour as deacon at my church in Knoxville, but everything that I found related to infertility or adoption, because I got to the point where I was kind of debating, was full of what my mother calls glittering generalities. The whole, it's God's will and God's timing. And while I absolutely agree with that, and I do agree that His plan is much bigger than our limitations can see, I also needed something very real to help me. I needed a friend on a page, because it is a private struggle sometimes. Now, I'm pretty open, obviously. I wrote a book about everything. But I really needed, you do a lot of the suffering in private. And it's really hard to articulate. And when you're going through infertility, especially, it's a cycle of hell. It's an absolute cycle of emotional hell. Every month, I took 65 pregnancy tests, and they were all negative. I only took one positive pregnancy test ever, and that was refusing. And so I decided, after going through infertility and then the adoption process, which, by the way, is a whole different mountain to climb. One of my favorite quotes from my book, quote myself, and I put it on the back cover, is no one just adopts. That's a really shallow thing to say. You don't just adopt. You might just buy a new handbag. You might just go to Panama City instead of Destin. You don't just adopt. It is the most intentional process in the human experience, I think. Because everything is affected, and everyone you know, in some capacity almost, has to be involved. Okay? So I went through all that, and it was an 8-year process from deciding to have another child to actually meeting him. 8 years, almost to the day. So I wrote the book that I needed, because I thought there must be women out there who need their story told, and I tell it like it is, and they need a friend to help them suffer in private, and to give them hope, and to just be plain spoken. So one of my students, I teach 9th grade, and at Maryville, which is a really, well, they think a lot of themselves in Maryville, y'all. It is a great school. And I said, one of you should use my book as your independent novel study, because they could choose nonfiction or whatever. And one of the sweet little girls said, Miss Dyer, looked at it, but the Lexile score's too low. She said, like that was offensive. That's the score based on vocabulary, difficulty of vocabulary. And I said, well, first of all, I wrote it that way on purpose. It should be easy to read. Some people read it in one sitting. The point of the book is a ministry. And obviously, I would like to make a little money, because I still owe on the baby. I'm still paying for it, and he's 4. So, but I wrote it as a ministry to help people, so I didn't want any vocabulary to be a barrier. But the themes, and this is what I told the student, are very complex, just like Old Man in the Sea. Well, I'm not comparing my book to Old Man in the Sea, but the themes are complex. For example, my husband was adopted in 1963. His situation is obviously closed, as most adoptions were back then. And if you have parents who are aunts or uncles or grandparents even who were adopted, they could relate to that. We have 2 typed pages, and my husband is so old that the page, he's 50 now, he's not really old, but I tease him. The pages are that onion paper. Remember onion skin paper? They're like, ooh, a letter from Grandma, and it's so thin you can almost see through it. Typed by a social worker. And that's all we know. And the specifics we have about him are height and weight of parents and grandparents, and that his birth father was a natural athlete. And he clings to that. And he played college basketball. And it's really neat. And then our adoption is wide open. So in the book, I compare 1963 and 2010. His style of adoption is becoming antique and almost obsolete because of the world we live in. I mean, it's almost impossible to keep everything a secret. And we know this from social media and other things, but also if you meet a birth parent, you're in the hospital, and they say, Carrie Jones, room 11, Carrie Jones, you're like, hey, that's my friend over there, I'd rather her here, you know, so anyway, so that's one of the themes where I compare 1963 and 2010, closed and open. And also, because I gave birth, I can compare pregnancy and adoption. And they are both wonderful, both can be scary, obviously, but they are profoundly different experiences. I knew when I had Houston that I would leave with him, barring tragedy, and I was not naive about that either, because I had a birth defect that was scary for me. So I always had that mindset. But they are profoundly different. And then, of course, I compare my relationship with adoption to my mother-in-law's. So we have some universal commonality in that we both struggled to conceive. We both took those negative pregnancy tests. She wrote a few pages in the book about her experience, and they are funny and poignant and really telling. She wore pantyhose. How many of you actually wear pantyhose? Not anymore. No, the last time I wore pantyhose was at IHOP because Shirley made me. She was the head waitress. Pigeon Forge, nonetheless. So she wore pantyhose to meet Jeff, my husband. Pantyhose, like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so it's a really neat comparison of all the different aspects, really complex themes, and entertaining to read. So what I would like to talk to you guys about, and this won't be so long because I do want to answer questions. Because our adoption is so open, my son's name is Scotty. There's a monster at the end of the book. That was one of my favorite books growing up. I'm like, there's a monster at the end of this book. His name is Scotty. His birth mother's name is Carrie, and his birth father's name is Bryant. Just so you know who I'm talking about. Because our adoption is so open, I wasn't able to write that book. If we had a semi-closed or closed adoption, the book would not be, I don't think, the ministry that it is. And Carrie and I do speaking engagements together pretty often, typically for Bethany, but we help write articles and things like that together too. There's an extensive interview in the book where I just ask her questions and she answers them, and it may slow the book down for certain readers, but for waiting parents, it is their favorite section, because how many of you know a birth mother? And how many of you, if you do, would ask these questions? So we just lay it out there, and it's really, really helpful. So what I'd like to talk to you about is, as Christian women, as friends and sisters and cousins and co-workers, what is our role when someone is struggling with infertility and adoption? Well, I like to use abstract, picturesque themes with my students because it helps them remember. I'll even do crazy hand motions, and they're like, oh my gosh, Ms. Dyer, what are you doing? I say, you'll remember this during the EOC. You'll remember me jumping up and down, because it's quite a scene to see me do that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is she's not just rolling silverware. So I mentioned IHOP. When I was 19, my father passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. And that changed the way I thought about everything, obviously. But also immediately, I had to go to work because my mother was a teacher in Sevier County. And her salary back then was probably in the 20,000s. And we had to pay the light bill. So I went to IHOP because I knew I could work a breakfast shift and be with her at night. And I remember standing behind the line. Has anybody worked in restaurants? Okay, everybody should. All of our children need to serve at least one summer. Okay, so I'm standing behind the line, rolling silverware, and it's a tourist town, so which is a great place to grow up because everybody's happy. Like, there are 6,000 residents in Pigeon Forge, say, but 9 million people come through. So the majority of the people are in great moods. So it's a great place to grow up. So I'm standing there rolling silverware, and I just watch these tourists, and they're all like, happy, happy, happy. And I think, I am so miserable. I am in a surreal place. If you've lost someone you love, really close especially, it's otherworldly. the scope of that grief is not real. It's crazy, which it's not supposed to be. So I'm sitting there rolling silver. I'm like, here I am, 19. I'm an only child. I worship my father. We're really close. He's gone, and these dingbats I'm having to take an order for the Rudy Tooty Fresh and Fruit with blueberries, please. And I need bacon. And don't make it too hard. And don't make it too soft. And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, really? I'm sure I was a really bad waitress. There were times when we were out of Snickers pie because I didn't want to do it. It was sticky. And I hit the wall. And the line, you know, it's funny, but the women who worked there were not too easy on me. The men were great. So I learned a lot that summer. Mostly that you don't know what's going on with a person. And I'm just as guilty, okay? I'll be like, gosh, she's a grouch. What is her deal? She's so impatient. And then I find out, oh, menopause, well, no wonder. My work teaching colleague, her name is Sherry, but I write a blog too, and it's all funny. It's supposed to be. But she's, I nickname all the characters, and she's Red Hot Backspace. Because she's postmenopausal, she burns up all the time. Her room is freezing. You had teachers with cold rooms. Remember that? And she always has to hit backspace because she has these long, like, manicured, fancy hair. And so her nickname is Red Hot Backspace. I'm like, no wonder it's so hot in there. So the students don't even go, oh, it's so hot in there. Maybe she's uncomfortable and has to go to work and burn up all day, okay? Maybe that waitress is a grouch because her car broke down on the way here. Or maybe her child just got diagnosed with something tragic, okay? So I think our role as women and coworkers and friends and Sunday school classmates is to dig a little bit deeper. And just think, she's not just rolling silver. She could be living through infertility. She may have taken another pregnancy test again this month and just be distraught. No matter how many children she already has, by the way. And then the other thing is, walk a mile in her bra. There's plenty of space in mine. You could walk for days. But women, we kind of bear the brunt up here and here for everyone we know. I remember when I was a housewife for a while. That was lovely. And then I ran out of money. So I remember going back to work, and my mother said, are you dreading it? And I said, you know what worries me about it? Not the work, because I'm kind of ready for a paycheck again, and the action and all that, and interaction. But you take on all the pain of the people you know. And if you don't know those people, you're not having all that pain. If I didn't know Miss McCall, I wouldn't have to deal with her scares from breast cancer, that she's, gotten over it, but now she's like, I wouldn't have to go through that with her. I wouldn't have to freeze to death in the classroom because she's postmenopausal. I wouldn't have to deal with teacher KR's attitude because she's having some feminine problems and her husband works all the time. Okay, so we take that on. So what I think we should do is be active participants, not just here, not just here. What would have meant the world to me when I was going through infertility and adoption would have been if someone had asked or said, instead of asking trite, cliche questions, how long is it going to take? Do you have any news? What's involved? I'll be praying for you. That's great. And I could feel that. I really, really could. For the first time in my life, I felt people praying for me during the adoption, not the infertility. Except my big old mama. She was there the whole time. But what would it have meant if someone had said, okay, I researched domestic adoption. I told now I get it. Okay, you could have a 3-day to 10-year wait. You could be indefinitely paper pregnant. Boy, that's expensive. I sent a check to your agency in your honor, in your name. When I was writing with the domestic adoption process and international, you basically have to write what I call the essay of your life. And it was really challenging for my husband, who's not so much a student. He tells me on lesson plans to do the chapter, do the questions at the end, and move on. That's his counseling. I'm like, you would never make it in this Common Core or whatever they're talking about today. Or he's like, what? Those questions are in the book. I'm like, No. So when he had to write an essay of his own describing his relationship with Jesus, he got stuck after John 3:16. And so it was interesting to watch him. But you know how men are so simple. They're simple. They're easy to understand. Typically, we're not. We're really complicated. His answers, once he got them out, and there's a really funny scene in the book about that, where it's a chapter titled "Big Chick If You Have to." His answers were incredible. They were beautifully simple. And guess what Carrie loved the most in everything we did? Jeff Dyer. She worships him. And a lot of times, birth mothers typically make these decisions. I mean, for the most part, they're making the big decision. They really look at that daddy, because most of them, a lot of them don't have that. But anyway, so I wrote a letter to my 6th grade English teacher, because I love to write letters. And her name is Jody Harold. She was at Pigeon Forge Elementary when I had her. And I said, I just want to thank you for the parts of speech, that whole deal, because it's really coming in handy right now. And I recognized that I had to articulate my soul in an essay, first about my relationship with Jesus, and then also about our family. Like, how do you describe your existing child without sounding self-aggrandizing? Oh, he's wonderful, straight up. That was tough. That was a challenge. And she wrote me back, thanking me, like that was really sweet and funny and all that. And she also sewed me a baby blanket. That and a couple of nightgowns that my mother bought me were the only tangible gifts that anyone gave me while I waited. 8 years. Okay? 8 years. So what can we do for each other? We can investigate and inform ourselves. Okay? I tell my students all the time, enlighten yourself. Don't wait for somebody to give you information. Look it up. Look it up. Be resourceful. As a friend, as a sister, as a minister, as a leader. So when my cousin Annie found out that our agency was in 33 states, Bethany's in 33 states, she said, I'm saving all my Sky Miles for you. She works internationally. So she really paid for her flights during that 2-year process while we waited. That was meaningful, okay? That's a tangible testimony of faith. If somebody you know, how many of you know somebody who's waiting for a baby with adoption? I'm not saying that for me. Authors don't make money. I'm a teacher. I'm not motivated by money. Buy my book from them, for those ladies, those families, and I'll put something in there, but it would be a tangible gift. How many of you have bought anything for these families? Okay. Buy them a hooded towel. Do you know what that would mean? A hooded towel for somebody who is desperately trying to get what we all have, which is normal. It's a primal wound to be infertile. It is primal wound. And even if someone is called to adopt, there's a lot of criticism within the adoption industry, if you want to call that. Oh, she already has a baby. She's selfish. We want another. She already has 5. You don't know. God tells people to do things for all kind of reasons, and He uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. One of my friends that I've made, her name is Debbie, and she wrote a book called But the Greatest of These is Love. She had 3 happy children. She was depressed for a year because basically God was telling her, go to Russia and get this little boy. She was miserable. His name was Roma. He's wild. He's beautiful. He's not been easy. He's wild. He's awesome. But it was a major disruption to her family, but she just said, when God's telling you to do something, you do it, let the chips fall. If it's the right thing, it'll be okay. And I talk to adoptive mothers all the time, and most say, yeah, my mom bought me gowns, and we saved up diapers, and it's really hard to celebrate. One of my friends, Toby, I write about her in the book, she had a 9-year wait. She had 5 failed placements with adoption at some point. Okay, she is my hero. And she's madly in love with her baby, Ivy, who came last summer. But she said, when I go somewhere like Babies R Us, I can't help but want to buy something. This was years ago. And she said, I can't help but want to buy something. But I feel like I'm shopping for a ghost. Mm-hmm. What would it mean if somebody who is not going to parent that child, and it's just your buddy, says, look, I bought something for Ivy. Mm-hmm. That's tangible testimony. That's real faith. Because if they wait long enough, they'll bring babies home, or children, whatever. And don't, this is something that I see too, because I'm out there in cyberspace. And a lot of judgment. Okay, adoption's totally different now. People come at it for all different reasons. And each situation is as unique as the people involved. So I got a lot of, why didn't you foster? Well, I had all kind of reasons not to foster. None bad, none selfish, none shallow. It just wasn't right for my family. Why didn't you international? At least somebody in America has a better shot, right? That's probably true. But you have to match up the resources, which is often money. Unfortunately, that's a big issue in adoption, lack of, on both sides. You have to match up the emotional stamina that you have, the financial resources, the help, all that. Some people may have 3 children, but like, there's no way I can go to Russia for a month, twice. And in our case, you'll see people go in bunches to certain countries, and then you'll see that country shut down. Well, in our case, if we spent $10,000, I mean, I'm a teacher, my husband's a salesman, then we wouldn't get a baby ever, or a child. Why don't you adopt a biracial child? That was one I got a lot. Why don't you get a black baby? There are more of them out there. That is not true. There are all colors of babies, especially in Tennessee. A lot more white ones probably too. And my answer to that, which was pretty bold and made me nervous, was, do you want to be the only white person you know? I mean, I just got a little defensive sometimes. It's not that I wouldn't love a black baby, but I mean, I'm from the deep South, and so are my relatives. I was black. She's from Mobile. She's the cutest thing that I've ever seen in my life, and I'm kind of jealous. Mostly because she's a girl. But I looked at China, and I looked at other countries, so the racial thing wasn't an issue for me, but it might have been for the child. And my social worker said, don't you feel guilty about that? And it's funny because I was talking at the MOPS group in Bearden a couple of weeks ago. And I said that, and I was like, oh, here we go. And this Korean woman was there. And she said, thank you for saying that. She said, her family adopted 4 children, 2 domestic Caucasian, and her and her brother. And they're Korean. And they're not biologically related, whatever. They're both Korean. She said, and that sometimes I feel really alone. And I said, so it's okay if I say that? She said, you need to say that. Okay. It's a little scary writing a book and saying stuff. And so walk a mile in her broth, really get to know what her situation is. If it's a diagnosis or a sick child, if her child's having trouble in school, ADHD, don't be like, oh Lord, overdiagnosed. Read about it. I have a friend who supposedly takes a lot of painkillers. And we've got some friends who like to talk about her. Well, she has Sjogren's syndrome. And I thought, I'm just going to look that up. Because I was like, well, she does sneak off to the car every now and then and come back a little loose. I mean, it's true. So, then I thought, well, I'm just going to look it up. And then once I read about that, and then my uncle has debilitating arthritis, and he said, oh, don't you question anything she does. It takes her 2 hours to get going in the morning. There's so much physical pain. So if you've ever lived with that kind of pain. So if I hadn't researched that, I might be in that gaggle of women going, oh my God, there she goes to her van again. We still look at her stumbling to the dugout. She stumbles because she can't walk. And she's had 2 hip replacements and 2 knee replacements because of that issue. She's not drunk or high. She's uncomfortable and in pain. So research and be proactive. And then the last thing that I think we need to remember is to be the band and not the coach. And I've kind of alluded to that a little bit, but everybody loves the band. I was in the UT band, and I was in the band in 92 to 95, I graduated in December, again, because we were broke and I had to hustle out of there, help mama. The band at UT, the football players and the cheerleaders have a great relationship. They always have. And I remember my buddies like high-fiving the player. We'd be on the sideline, we're out there looking really sexy, right? In my size 38 flood spats and this deal. It's really something. And my uncle sent me a letter. Y'all think this is funny. He was in a retirement home in Oregon, and he said, Jody, I was reading about your school, the University of Tennessee, and there's a boy at your school that I think you ought to go after. And I think you might have a shot because you're in the band and he's on the football team. And his name's Peyton Manning. And I said, well, Uncle Glenn, I wrote back, Uncle Glenn, I'm doing the best I can. I don't think I have the right outfit. And he did run by me, but he didn't. I just didn't catch his eye. I think it was my plume. It's like, hey, Peyton. So anyway, didn't work out. But the band, look, he came over there, whoop, whoop. The football players love the band, and the cheerleaders ride with the band. And I can tell you some things about Smokey, poor guy. Thank goodness he's a dog and can't talk. He's seen a lot. But our job is not to coach or critique a friend or family member or second guess. Our job is to be there to support them. Okay? And when we're grandparents, maybe write a check, help out. That's what I tell the grandparents. But your job is to think, okay, I'm not responsible for parenting this child. A lot of times, and Carrie and I agree on this, and we talk about it in the book, our friends were more supportive than family. Not necessarily attitudinally, but they talked about adoption more. They helped us more. Our family, I think, they were scared because they had an interest in the child too. Like, my mother was pretty good. I had to enlighten and educate her. But every time I went to a meeting or a class or whatever, then I would call her up and tell her everything, okay? So that's normal. But you don't do that with everybody else. Friends will listen because there's a certain polite distance, and we really need to think about that with family members. Treat your family member like you would a friend. You will listen, sometimes listen better to friends. And you don't have as much at stake. If the child goes wacko, or comes home from Siberia with fetal alcohol syndrome, you're just there to support them too. But a family member like, oh no, what are we going to do? I'm gonna have to, so it's scarier, I think. So I cut family members slack, but I think we can also be more like friends in that situation, and be more like the band. And typically, coaches are criticized big time, right? You don't want to be the Lane Kiffin of your friend's adoption story. You want to be the pride of Southland. You want to be supportive, and you are instrumental in that story. And in my book, you can see throughout my story that friends were way more verbal and involved than family members. And there's no animosity. I think it was their own fear and scare. They were just scared, and I think some of them just thought we would get a baby, including my mother-in-law. She was terrified because of my husband's age that we would never get a child. And so that's something we can do. Okay? So you dig a little deeper. She's not just rolling silverware. Walk a mile in her bra, buy a hooded towel, or buy a book, or anything to demonstrate that you care and you understand, you get it, and then be supportive. Be the band, not the coach that gets fired usually after doesn't win a championship. Okay. Now I didn't tell you a whole lot about our specific story because I think sometimes it's better for you to just ask questions, and I don't want to retell a book. I'd rather you read it and enjoy it. And my email is in the inside cover. So if you have someone who's going through this, or you have specific questions as you read it, you can email me. Because it is a ministry for Carrie and me. And we do talk to people all the time, almost every day. Okay. So what questions do you have about anything? Yes?
How can you be a real encouragement to women that are struggling with infertility but haven't considered adopting? Like they're still hoping to conceive, and like I was sharing with you, the friends that I know that don't have kids, and there's oftentimes they're at our baby showers and the kids' birthday parties, and every now and then they'll say something and it's like the elephant in the room, and nobody knows, like we don't want to be hokey or not genuine in our response, and we do say the things you were saying, like, oh, we're praying for you, or I'm so, like, what do you say? What do you do?
I would be as specific as possible. Also cut them a lot of slack because those baby showers can be a nightmare. I remember my cousin trying to get pregnant, and she wanted to be a mother her whole life, and I was terrified that she was going to have to follow in my footsteps, and I think I scared her. I think she was afraid of that too. And we threw a little shower for another family member, just like a little fun thing at Thanksgiving where we could all just bring presents, and she broke down. I mean, she broke down, and I was more private about my breakdowns and temper tantrums. I mean, I dismantled a baby bed and threw it down the steps. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty crazy. But she just couldn't contain it, and I knew what to say. I said, look, it is a matter of time, and sometimes all you can do is endure, and it sucks. And one of the most meaningful things that anybody said to me when my father passed away was, this really sucks. I said, yes, it does. Not, he's with Jesus. I didn't want him with Jesus. I wanted him in his chair. I wanted him in his chair, watching TV, right? With me, coming in there saying, Daddy this, Daddy that, question, question, question. All right? I think be specific in your response and say, look, I don't know what that's like, but it's got to be hell. And I want you to know that I respect you for going through it. Don't try to give them counsel on what to do, because there are all kind of options. And the people who are going through that are, trust me, they're educated. One of the things that my mother wrote on that she offered for the to-do list was, when an adoptive parent or someone who's been through IVF or any form of anything, okay, or chooses a certain cancer treatment or whatever, just understand that person made an informed decision. I mean, I have a 2-year degree in during the adoption process. And so just don't question the choices that person's making or the motivation. Just say, I'm here to support you, and here's what I would like to do. I'm going to send $10 a month to your adoption agency. That's all I've got. Or if that person does a fundraiser, for goodness sakes, don't question that, because you can raise a baby. You can't necessarily buy them up front. They're real expensive up front. And infertility too. I mean, that's god-awful, that expense. I mean, it can be thousands and thousands and thousands. I know people who've spent $60,000. It's a primal wound to be infertile. And some women just need that. They have to be able to carry that child. It's just part of being female. And so I would just say, I'm here for you. And every time you have an appointment, let's say you're doing an IUI, which can be a little awkward for everybody involved, particularly the men, and a little embarrassing. Say, I'm going to babysit. You call me when you ovulate. I'm not joking. Say, call me when you ovulate, and he has to participate, and you all have to go to the office, and I will come watch your children. Or if she's had a procedure, bring her casserole. We love casserole. Just something. Flowers. I did have surgery, and one person brought me flowers, and I was like, how sweet, because it's an elective surgery. I didn't have a knee replacement or an aneurysm. I mean, I was trying to get pregnant, but she was like, you know what, this is awful. And I have 2 children, and I'm really thankful for them. And good for you for giving it everything you've got, Jody. Here's some roses. Just like, wow. I mean, that meant the world to me. Just like that baby blanket. So, buy diapers.
Buy diapers? That scares me.
Yeah, it is scary.
I'm like,
Think what it's like for her.
So if I sent her something like a baby blanket or something, you don't think it would like I'm like, would that not make her cry, or because she doesn't have one?
I don't know. What do you think? I think it would make her
I had friends who said that was insulting or hurtful. I had a friend who somebody gave her something and she was hurt, but seeing it made her feel the loss.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm nervous to do that.
Yeah.
Now, if you have more, I mean, that's one person I know. So if you
I wouldn't do anything you're not comfortable doing. Like
I'll
if
do
it's awkward
flowers.
for you not do it. A book might be a good thing.
Yeah, that's what
Like
I was thinking.
a book about because miscarriage, is all too common and terrible. And one of another author wrote From Pain to Parenthood. Her name is Deanna Kaler, and she addresses miscarriage really well, about how awful that is and how misunderstood. And she had an early on miscarriage, and she said people were like, well, it's just early. She's like, I don't want a baby. Where's that baby? So maybe a book, a devotional, just something. I would just say anything physical. With the adoption, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because you can't, with infertility, adoption is almost really, to me, unless there's some odd situation, I don't know. I know people who are still waiting, but I also know lots of women who waited a long time, or not a long time, 2 or 3 days, depending. And they all have babies, children. I say babies, but they're all different ages. So I know one family, they waited 5 years and adopted a 7-year-old little boy. And so adoption almost is more hopeful. Infertility is physically, what can you control? You don't know. I mean, and you're ruling out things as you go, and it's just awful. But so I would say anything, whatever makes you comfortable, even if it's just a handwritten note.
We have some friends that are struggling. We have some friends that are struggling with infertility right now, and it's been, I guess, 4 years that they've been trying, and they had a failed IVF. So some of us got together and did a gift basket after that.
Yeah.
Chocolate, wine, a gift certificate to a restaurant, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just, hey, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you,
Yeah.
but here's something as you grieve this loss.
Yeah, it wouldn't be necessarily a baby-related item, just anything sweet and thoughtful.
And I think it depends on the person too, because
Yeah.
there's some people that are so full of hope even through the process, and then there are some people that can't get past the dark spot. And you kind of figuring out how to meet them where they are is so hard.
Mhm. What other questions? What about open adoption? I didn't talk much about that. That's usually,
I know a couple, actually I'm friends with her sister, but anyways, they've ruled out the fact that they're probably not going to, they've been trying for like 10 years. And they've started doing the whole adoption process, and I think the idea of open adoption scares them.
yeah.
Just the what ifs, what if that mom changes her mind, and
Yeah.
I mean, how do you
Yeah.
navigate through that or encourage them through that, or
Well, look at it as a spectrum, okay? Like this, okay? So this could be closed adoption, like what a lot of us at our age, in our age group are more familiar with. And then you can go all the way over here to what Carrie and I have. And the reason that ours is so open really is because we met early in the pregnancy and our personalities. And she lives right off Western Avenue, and I live right off Kingston Pike. I mean, and I needed, she was really the only person who could convince me that she wasn't going to change her mind. And I eventually would work up the nerve and say, are you going to change your mind? I mean, I just was like, I'm just going to go for broke. And of course they all say no, and then a lot of them do. That's part of the risk, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's 50-50 until the rights are terminated. So in our case, as open and as close as we became, which mostly I would take her to lunch, her and her mother. Her mother was with us every time, and her